Belanjawan 2026 was tabled amid growing in global momentum for digital asset regulation and institutional adoption. Yet Malaysia's budget speech made no direct mention of digital assets, crypto taxation or blockchain infrastructure incentive. Despite the sector's estimate 1.4 billion ringgit in local trading volume in 2024 and increasing institutional interest, the omission raises question: is Malaysia missing a strategic opportunity to position itself as a regional digital asset hub? Are institutional players still left in regulatory limbo? Joining us to unpack this is Tang, General Manager for APAC at Luno Malaysia, one of the country's leading digital asset platforms. I want to say thank you very much, Aaron. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Thank you for having me, Nina.
No worries. From your view, does Belanjawan 2026 do enough to provide the regulatory certainty institution need to allocate to digital assets in Malaysia? If not, what is missing?
I think Belanjawan 2026 was very, very interesting, especially there are actually some mentions of digital assets. For example, if you talk about the Labuan IBFC, so the Labuan International Business Financial Center, there was talk about making it into a digital Islamic finance hub, talking about global sukuk initiatives, ability to launch sukuk and be traded on digital asset exchanges. Now, I think that's to my knowledge, the one mention of digital assets. However, I think in terms of the other things that it's not so much missing from budget 2026 as a lot of these initiatives have already been announced. So, for example, earlier this year, PMX has mentioned about things like the Digital Asset Innovation Hub, things like the desire to make Malaysia a blockchain hub and so on. So in terms of the budget 2026 itself, perhaps it does not go so much into the details of digital assets there, but definitely some of the programs, some of the initiatives are already in the planning, and we wait with bated breath to see what will come out from these initiatives.
And one practical driver of institutional adoption is tax treatment. What targeted tax reform, or we can say this is one of the budget, we can say tax and also a lot of things that was focused. And then examples of capital gains, corporate tax treatment of crypto holdings or VAT, SSC treatment. Would most salary institution putting digital assets on their balance sheets? What's your POV?
Yeah, so the good thing is we already have quite a good certainty in this area, even though not specifically mentioned in budget 2026, right? But we recently had our own institutional digital asset conference about a few weeks back. And actually, most of these items that you've mentioned, there's already certainty. So that's a really good step for Malaysia. I'll give you some examples. So it's very clear that Malaysia does not currently impose capital gains tax, CGT, on digital assets. So basically companies or individuals who hold digital assets, they are able to hold it for investment and not pay tax on those gains. Now, there's also clarity in terms of trading activity. So for example, if people are actively trading digital assets, then of course that falls into the category of income, and then people will be able to be taxed on that. So I think there is already guidance. All the accountants, the consultants in this country, many are actually very, very well aware of this tax treatment for digital assets. And I think perhaps we have not been that loud enough, or we have not shared enough in terms of the awareness and the education of that matter. But definitely, if companies want to hold digital assets today, whether for investment or whether for active trading, the institutional regulation guidelines, they are already in place.
And the governments often weigh incentives against financial integrity risks. What incentive structure would you propose that both attracts institutional custody or trading businesses to Malaysia and reassures regulators about AML or CFT and custody safety?
I think it's always important to have a balanced approach. So we're talking about balancing something that is new and innovative, but anything new and innovative definitely comes with risk, right? So I think Malaysia has gone about it in quite the right way, in terms of we are already announcing several of these sandboxes and initiatives. So something that I've mentioned earlier in terms of Bank Negara Malaysia launching their Digital Asset Innovation Hub, And then I think the other regulatory bodies like the Securities Commission, MDEC are also very, very active in the space to try and encourage more and more innovation. So SC also has their own sandbox and so on. So I think one of the critical things is to encourage more participation into these sandboxes. And I think sandboxes are really good because they allow you to do innovation and prove something before you actually take on, for example, a lot of investment and a lot of costs in some of the supporting areas. I think some of the other interesting things that could encourage this kind of innovation. We've seen Malaysia do very well before in offering tax breaks, tax incentives to companies who decide to launch their products or decide to move their headquarters to Malaysia. So I think that's always very, 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 very good for companies. And I think lastly, in terms of what do you call that, in terms of building up the local ecosystem. So, we do need to continue to have highly talented, highly technical people. So I think continued engagement with education, education bodies, for example, universities and so on. Also grants in terms of research that will also help the ecosystem to continue to develop talent.
All right, talking about the ecosystem, we need the right framework, and Belanjawan 2026 continues to outcome-based incentive frameworks for high-value industries. How could an outcome-based incentive be structured specifically for blockchain developers, node operators, or Web3 infrastructure to boost even more R&D and jobs without encouraging low-quality token launches?
Yeah, I think a couple of ideas. So for example, some incentives could be milestone-based grants. So for example, we launch a project, we need to achieve X target, Y target. That could be encouraging for some of the local entrepreneurs. Something I mentioned about, don't want to keep saying it, but corporate tax incentives. So for example, a pioneer project may be able to have 5 years of preferred tax treatment, or maybe even other tax incentives. I think the important thing to mention is that many of these discussions are already happening. So I think about 2 weeks back, I was also sitting together with some of our industry partners. We were discussing with some of the ministry players and also a lot of the industry partners in terms of what can we do, what are we looking ahead for the roadmap for the national blockchain. So I think a lot of these are underway, and we of course continue to be very, very supported and wait to see what happens.
And this is a very exciting journey, and definitely it could not happen without collaborations and cooperation from every stakeholder, especially from the public-private. And for Malaysia to be a regional hub, a reliable custody and settlement infrastructure are critical. What public-private steps, regulatory sandboxes, as you mentioned earlier, co-founded custody labs, industry standards, would you like to see in the Belanjawan or follow-up policies actions?
Yeah, I think some of these actions, they don't have to specifically be mentioned in Belanjawan, given that these are basically industry initiatives together with the regulators, right? So in our dealing with the regulators, they have been very, very encouraging to ask us, as an industry, you have to work together. It's not just like competing with each other. Competition is there, but I think the collaboration, especially for a new industry like blockchain, digital assets, and so on, the collaboration between industry players is very, very important. So I'll give you an example. For example, in terms of the anti-money laundering or counter financing of terrorism kind of guidelines, the regulators may be able to give us a template, or they'll give us a guideline of expectations, right? But that itself is based on principles. So in terms of best practices, how does the industry actually implement these practices? A lot of that can happen between, say, an industry association and so on. So we've done, for example, we have an industry association. Our industry association has a working group between the compliance officers. And I think that's a very, very good example of how both private institutions can also work together as a team and also work together with regulators.
And that is from the public-private partnerships and even custody infrastructure. And also, we want to take the whole chain is safe, even from the provider until the consumer, and financial inclusion and consumer protection especially. One argument for national encouragement of digital asset is financial inclusion and innovation. How should the budget balance measures that encourage retail access with consumer protection, education, disclosure, dispute resolution, so Malaysia can avoid past crypto market harms?
Yeah, a couple of initiatives are already being discussed with the regulators, with the Securities Commission at the moment. So I think they've recently launched a 2.0 guidelines for digital asset exchanges. And I think the industry is still discussing in terms of what the regulator is asking. But the Securities Commission is basically trying to help the sector grow up, right? Become stronger in terms of governance, in terms of customer safety, in terms of making sure that this industry continues to thrive and be very, very attractive. I'll talk about some of the things that have been mentioned by the regulator. So in terms of digital asset coin listings today in Malaysia, we only have 22. But moving forward, say, I believe sometime next year, when there is ability for digital asset exchanges themselves to be a bit more flexible in terms of the digital assets that they can list, I think this will be very, very attractive for the digital asset exchanges. I think consumers will also have more choices. However, of course, we have to make sure that the consumers are protected. So in terms of some of the proposals, there are things that we have to have stricter standards in terms of custody, stricter standards in terms of our operations. So I think these are already being discussed at the moment. And I think it's very encouraging that the regulator is wanting us to move forward.
All right, and probably our last question to close our discussion. Should budget funds be allocated for national crypto literacy campaigns or protected investors compensation schemes?
I mean, in an ideal world, Nina, we would have both. We would have, a lot of education. We would have compensation schemes. However, budget is budget. It's using a limited amount of funds. So I think what industry players like ourselves can do, industry players, regardless of what's mentioned in the budget, right? What industry players like ourselves can do, we can also put a lot of investment into helping educate our customers. So I'll give a worrying piece of statistic is that I think millions or hundreds of millions are lost to scams, and a lot of these times these scams are in the digital asset. They call it digital asset, but it's not even maybe digital asset. Maybe it's an impersonation scam or so on. So I think industry players like ourselves, we need to continue to educate the public, and I think we should be helping to put some of our efforts and perhaps even some of our funds to work together to educate people more.
All right, thank you very much for joining us this morning and helping us to understand one of the excerpts from Belanjawan 2026 and how can we give further focus on the digital asset and what are the required environment that we need to build the whole ecosystems from below to upper. And again, I would say thank you very much to our guest, Tang, General Manager APAC of Luno Malaysia. And that is the segment for Belanjawan 2026. And right after this, we're going to move on to AWANI International.